Cool. I think we're live. How's it going, you guys? Hopefully things are good. I'm obviously just kind of starting right away without an audience just yet. We'll see if people show up for this live stream, and we'll see how things go. Uh, we'll get a confirmation about audio and stuff like that. Video I haven't been on for a minute, so wanted to get back on and do some live streaming to do a bit of meet and greet Q&A, but also just to work on a few things I got to work on. I got some commissions I got to do, a few pieces that are also for clients, and I figured doing a live piece, for the stream would be fun. So for those of you that hang out and join me here, welcome. This will be, a bit of a longer one, probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours, the average usual time. But for as YouTube live streams go, it's a good amount of length. So hope you guys are able to hang out for a little bit and come chat. And welcome for those of you that are here. So what we're going to be doing today is just a client piece I have to do an illustration of. And it's for a friend who was producing a lot of these kind of like bows and the archery stuff for me. And we do a lot of trade, back and forth. So he would give me stuff like that and make me bows, and then from there I would kind of trade out actual pieces I would do for him that he would use for his own personal collection or for things like shirts and prints or whatever the case is. So that kind of like exchange of skill sets of trade is essentially what I also get into quite often when I work with people that I want to be able to collaborate with, essentially. So, and again, welcome for those of you that are here. And just to kind of give you guys a bit of a setup, because especially if you haven't come watched me before, you are welcome to obviously ask questions as much as you'd like to. I'll try to get to them best I can in the chat. If I happen to miss it, just obviously ask again, and I'll try to get into it as best as possible. If there are certain questions that I feel are not necessarily pertinent to our discussion of topic or stream of thinking, obviously I will avoid certain ones from there. And I like to control, exactly what it is we're going to be going into. So let's talk about some materials. I'm just using watercolor paper right now. This is a Strathmore. This is not necessarily like the highest brand of watercolor paper. Anybody can get this stuff at art stores. This is a Canson brand watercolor. Honestly, it's like bottom shelf. And it's not because it's a bad quality. It's just because, I need a lot of it. So doing things like client work and commission work, this is perfect good paper. Draws right, paints well, and scans well, so it's good size. So nothing wrong with this kind of watercolor paper that I have. From there, I'm going to be using some inks, brush pens, and whatnot. I have a couple here to choose from. This one, I'm not probably going to start with just yet. Might do some fills with it later on. We are going to be using the Pigma FB. We also do have the Thin Line. This one, I think, is kind of on its way out. I think it's about to die, actually. So I don't know if I'll turn to this one just yet. We'll test it and we'll see. So from there, we are also... give me 1 second. Hold on. Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure the stream was going steadily as we're also live. So these are the two pens I'll be sticking with. I might drop in the fountain pen, depending on even if it's working right now or not. Let me do a quick test on this. I've got a sheet of the paper in the back. This is just scrap. Okay, it's working. Let's test the brush pen. This one I think was kind of on its way. Oh, it's making a good mark. So I think it'll be okay for initial builds. Been beating it up. The FP should be good. Yeah. So those three pens are good to go. And what I'm going to be drawing here today is a scene with a character central, kind of in a Frazetta composition, triangle. And it was kind of suggested by the client. And this is for Heritage Boa Works. He's based up in Canada. And he wanted me to do a piece based on a character I had done for him beforehand. And we did a trade based on art illustration with his bow works, archery bows. And I created a character in front of a fire, and it's kind of all this like interesting visual images of smoke coming off of it. It was a nice piece we played with on watercolor. So I wanted to do another one. He wanted another one again. So this time it was a bit more of an action shot. So I have a scene in mind of like him on top here, and he's gonna be shooting the bow down this direction. Now I had already discussed and shown him some ideas based on how this image is gonna come out to. So as I'm drawing here with you guys today, this is not something where it's like on the spot random. This is stuff that's been somewhat kind of defined as to what we're going to be doing on the page. So I don't necessarily need to like problem solve thumbnail now, because that kind of round of discussion has happened before. So I'm not going to do an underlay. I'm just going to go straight in with the pen, just to establish where everything's going to go. I think I'll stick with the brush pen for now. I'll put the character up here, and he is going to be firing some arrows down this direction. So I have a multitude of like horde-like characters down this area in specifics, and we'll see if we can make it work. So what I want to do first is just give myself a sense of scale and position, like where things need to go. The main character will take about half of the page up to about here. The secondary half down to here will be, the enemy characters and such. So from here, from up to this position, that position, I think I have to have his head about here, if anything else. Excuse me as I get some lint and stuff out of the brush. Okay. So I'm going to just kind of mark things. Put his head up here. It's going to be probably right around down here. And this kind of gives me some early landmarks. Shoulder direction out this way. Just to give myself an idea as to like where things will go. And we can just kind of start right off by just kind of moving into the shoulder first. For no apparent reason, just to like, I want to have this slight forward position of his arm holding the bow. So I want to kind of establish that movement of overlap. And I'm going to kind of keep it at a distant view for now, and I'll zoom in every now and again. And as I said, you guys are welcome to ask questions. What's up, Jason? How's it going? Good. Just doing a live stream. It's been a minute, and so I wanted to jump on after the hecticness of all the shows and things that have been going on in the summer. I've been off a little bit from YouTube, mainly because of all the classes that got quite busy. And then from the classes, we had Comic Con come up and other shows. So as I had gotten all those things kind of wrapped up, I've been on break now for a little bit, but the break has been also kind of intertwined with other things of travel, and then of course of my recent move to a new place here in Pasadena. So now that I'm trying to settle in, hopefully I can kind of be more consistent in the next couple of weeks, as my classes are going to begin up real soon again. And as they do so, even though that those can get busy regardless, now that I won't have any other thing on the plate for all of August, I'm going to try to stay online on YouTube for a little bit, because this is still a place I want to dedicate more time to. It's a place of a platform I feel like is growing really well. And today, like I said, who knows how many will actually even attend the live stream, because when I do kind of these last minute live streams, pop-ups, not a lot of people show up, because it's kind of like, they're either on their way home from work, or they just didn't know what's going on, they're off the computer, and at the hour it is right now, people are probably having like dinner or family time, whatever the case is. So this is definitely one of those situations where I kind of do it for my own kind of personal thing for finishing some work. So for those of you that made it, great. For those of you that are watching the recording later on, to be able to watch and interact more into the future, you can definitely kind of just stay tuned more in the next couple of weeks in the month, and I'm going to try to hop on more. Welcome, Marky Chen from the Philippines. We also had another person here from Colombia, a lot of international people, which is great. And again, don't hesitate to ask questions regarding, focusing towards our usual discussions of art, design, industry, education, techniques, mindset, lifestyle. Those are the sort of topics I usually discuss within this platform on YouTube. Put his brow down here. And if you are kind of watching, hanging out a little bit here, either live or through watching the stream later on, you could definitely be sketching and drawing with me. Whether it's your own personal piece that you've been working on, or something you're actually doing for work, possibly just, kind of getting warmed up on things. This thin brush is a pen I got when I was in Japan. It's this pen called the Sumiro Thin Line. This thin line you can find on Amazon and Google pretty easily. Just type that in, thin line brush pens. You'll find it. I'm going to be doing a lot of dark fill, and that's going to be like the shadow shapes and whatnot. I won't be necessarily using this brush pen. I'll be using probably another one. I'm definitely going to want to let it dry in a little bit to soak into the paper before I do any sort of like watercolor work. I don't know if I'll get to watercolors today. I do plan to do this in full range of color, but that might be for another time when I have to get this wrapped up. Today, we're just kind of getting actually started on the piece. A question here from Guillaume from Brazil. Welcome. Oh, not a question, but yeah, you're welcome here. Jason had a question. Was watching Danny's channels on painting on some of the blacksmith sculptures. So this is the dragon stuff and the sculptures we made together as a piece to release within this year. Danny works with a company called Plastic Cell. He actually, obviously, with his brothers, own the company, and they make these small kind of figures made of well, they sculpt them either 3D or in hand, and they produce them. And they're kind of like the chibi head, large head kind of things. And they did a version of my character, so that one's coming out really soon. But your question was, oh, it wasn't a question; it was a statement. Where the fact that you saw it, that's great. Yeah, yeah, they're doing a lot of the wrap up on the final kind of like production. A lot of the base paint layers are being done. I'm taking about 10 of those pieces, and I'll be doing a custom paint job on them. So there'll be kind of a one-on-ones, individual pieces that I'll be just custom painting uniquely. Some of them will maybe match up to the accuracy of the character's design. Some of them I might just kind of play with, see what I'll do with them. So I'm gonna put his hand here. Let's see if there are any comments or other questions. Mark is asking any tips on positioning the arm and the hands. Well, the positioning is a very specific question when it comes to sketching and drawing. And right now, my paper is obviously vertical, and I'm not necessarily rotating the page quite a bit. I'm maintaining this angle of view just so I don't disorient you guys as you're viewing it, because constantly rotation of the paper doesn't look very nice on screen. So I usually have learned to be able to move my hand in different positions to be able to make the marks that I need. I don't think it's a bad idea to be able to rotate, and to turn your paper. I think it's totally fine to do. For me, I'm not rotating it mainly for the presentation of YouTube, videos. But for those of you that are kind of like, training, the rotation of the paper is perfectly fine. All right, so keep that first in mind. Second, there's a difference between the position of the arm to then the grip of the pen. All right. So the grip of the pen is something more specifically in tune towards things like pressure, right? Pressure to be able to maintain the thick line, for also stability control, speed control, that sort of thing. So grip strength is something that is needed because it's a part of the endurance of building up this longevity of being able to draw and sketch in a long period of time. As you hold the pen, of course, you can build up some strain and kind of like agitation or inflammation within joints and knuckles. And I do get them a little bit within the hand. But with more training, of course, it doesn't really become a huge detriment to your growth. Where things like your body positioning is much more important. Things like your neck, your back, all that kind of stuff. But first, grip-wise, it doesn't really matter how you grip the pen. All right, so first that we can get that out of the way. Usually I say this in the classroom. I've come across people that hold the pen in many different fashions. Some people that hold it like a fist, literally. Some people that hold it down like that. I have a standard writer's grip like this one here. I positioned the hand a little bit further back away from the end of the brush pen. This is what clearance of view to be able to see where I'm going. It also doesn't necessarily have me push down on the pen with too much force. So I want to give myself a bit of a distance and leverage. From there, the positioning of the hand is more about making sure I have stability, if anything else. So my palm is always in contact to the paper as I'm drawing and sketching. I don't lift it from the paper to draw because then I have no context of distance. Without distance, I don't know how much pressure to put on things. So I need to be able to touch the paper and slide along my palm or your pinky or your forearm or wherever you want to use it. So it doesn't matter the positioning of where your arm is. Whether you lift the elbow or you move from the shoulder or you go from the wrist. You got to use all the arm in combination depending on the kind of stroke you're making. Short strokes like this one here I'm making right now, mostly at the fingertips, right? A bit more arcing and straight line will come from the wrist. extend the elbow, a bit of movement from the shoulder. If I'm doing a lot of rotational movements, you'll see my elbow kind of lifted up slightly, but I'm moving at the shoulder as well too. It's an all combination together as well. But the more curvature and S curves you have, there's a lot more dexterity that goes into your finger, to your wrist, to your arm, all in position together to be able to move laterally and vertically. So, the positions of how you hold your arm and hand, comfort is important. As you'll notice, I'm not necessarily slouching forward and hunching over because I don't want to block the camera, but also that's just my natural position of the way I draw. I don't go super close into the paper just to see what I'm doing because you get tunnel vision. So the best thing to do is stay a bit of at a distance. It's a bit cumbersome at first because you feel like you don't have control of being able to see what you want to sketch and draw. But in due time, everything is practice, of course. I'm sure you understand. But those are the key kind of like advice elements when it comes to things like that. When positioning, grip, hand, all that kind of stuff. And it is important that you be mindful of it. Awareness is everything when it comes to it. Awareness is extremely important that you pay attention to things like grip strength, strain, issues of wrist or elbow or forearm, any sort of pain you got to be very, very mindful of because people don't really talk about things like that as much, I feel like, in education within our field. The actual physicality of drawing. And that, for me, a lot of my pain came from my neck area or on the side. Not so much in the hand as much, but for those people, students that I've had many students who had things like carpal tunnel, some elbow issues and whatnot. So that kind of stuff, positioning can aggravate it, or it can, obviously give you the longevity of use. But awareness is what I'm talking about, being able to pay attention, to like what you're actually feeling. Because if you're feeling any sort of pain, that's a bad sign. You shouldn't really be feeling a lot of pain when you're doing this stuff. I get aches here and there, but not pain to the point where I can't draw. And for those students I have come across that are like that, a lot of times they're either forcing it by going with extended amount of time where they shouldn't be going, or they're doing something wrong when it comes to position. Anyways, I hope that helps you a little bit, Marky. Steven, welcome, man. How's it going? Hope you're hanging out here a little bit. I wanted to actually talk to you. I was going to reach out to you this week or so, but I'll let you know. It was about the piece you gave me. I had to give back a piece of my own, a trade. A couple of the questions. Question right now is, what do you think is the most difficult thing to draw? Well, I mean, if you're asking me specifically, I don't find that there is a singular subject matter that I find incredibly difficult to draw. All things are hard to draw, but in terms of my ability to be able to capture them, I don't find them to be that, let's say, strenuous to be able to actually visually, kind of attain. So, in that sense, I don't really find any sort of, like I said, hindrances in subject matter, but drawing in general is difficult, of course. If I was to say, based on as an instructor, seeing people coming into the world as an introductory, which tends to be the most difficult subjects, obviously would be things like humans, right? And we see people every day, so when you see humans all the time, it's very easy to recognize something that's off. Symmetry, proportion, scale, and size, that sort of stuff. So those are things that, like I said, time and practice obviously comes into play. There's no real, kind of like trick or remedy to increase your ability to capture proportion or reality of the figure in an overnight success. But like everything, within skill-based things, it takes time. But we all get attracted to the human figure at first, mainly because, again, most of the things that we want to draw from observation are the things we interact with people most of the time. So from there, I think animals can come from second, because animals can be just as difficult proportionally when it comes to capturing them. It's also, for me, I think, when it comes to animals and people, as an organism, of being able to capture the blending of the surface level, the reality of the details of such things. Not the anatomy. Bone and muscle are important things to understand physiology and the way things work. But when it comes to how we indicate some of the features of animals and humans, students have a hard time being able to get the subtleties of them, if anything else, right? I mean, granted, people can say, well, I find machinery to be really hard. And yeah, that's pretty obvious. Like I said, everything is hard to draw. But in time, it can be made easier, mainly due to the fact of familiarity. When you're just familiar with the subject matter, it comes out a bit smoother. Let's see a couple of the questions here. Jose is asking, what's the commission for today? Well, it's a piece I'm doing for my bow maker. and he wanted another piece. That's gonna kind of this guy shooting a bow and arrow. I'm actually gonna put the bow on this side over here. I need to finish this part. And I don't know exactly what he's gonna use it for. I think he's gonna use it for things like shirts and sweaters again, like he did last time. And we'll see. Let's have the other bow. The arrow's gonna come out on this direction. Have it sit on top over here. And I'm giving some of these elements, props, a bit more dominance of feature, for instance, scale or sizing, to make it sure it stands off as illustration a bit stronger. Whereas, things like this arrow could be potentially a lot thinner or less, visible. But for the illustration's sakes, I have to design it in a manner where you can visibly see certain things better. So I have to make sure it stands out. Let's see, a couple of the questions. Do I also ever use gouache? I do. I like gouache quite a bit. Used to do a lot of gouache painting back in Art Center days, landscapes and whatnot. I haven't used gouache in a minute, but I do like it. I think it's a great medium in combination with things like watercolor. I would use watercolor first, primarily, to be able to do a lot of the base painting, and then use gouache as an opaque top layer. So that's usually the order in which I would work it in. A couple of the questions. Will I ever do a sketchbook like those of Kim Jung-gi? So I'm assuming what you're talking about are these large volume books. Not only from guys like Kim Jung-gi, but also, Carl Kempinski and even Katsuya Terada, who used to release these massive sketchbooks back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I used to look at those books quite often when I was a student at Art Center. That was kind of the main kind of resource, but also inspiration for me back at the time. Looking at Katsuya Terada's sketchbook, the 1,000-page sketchbooks, those ones were huge. And I saw Kim Jung-gi's kind of sketchbooks back around like 2013 and 14. So it was a number of years, passing from Katsuya Terada that I started to see some of Kim Jung-gi's work. But a lot of my work, I very much invoke Mobius to Terada, to a lot of the classical illustrators and whatnot, that incorporate the use of ink and that sort of stuff. But will I ever release one at that scale and sizing? The last sketchbook I ever put out was that 2014 year. 2014-15 was a 1 year kind of sketchbook. I just kind of curated. I think it was about 300 pages. So it wasn't necessarily a light sketchbook. It wasn't as big, maybe, as maybe some of the other ones that we're talking about. But I would say it was a good, decent size from what I was producing back then. I would like to be able to do another one. This year, especially during like things like Comic Con, I was getting a lot of interest, or I guess even like questions of inquiries of would I ever do a large sketchbook like that, or at least even just a sketchbook release in general. And like I said, there are plans. There's always plans of something. There's already tons of plans of other things. I'm trying to still finish up the second dynamic Bible, which is still being pushed a little bit, mainly because of publishing. It's timing, scheduling, because of Kim Jung-gi's passing for Superani. So the book is published by Superani itself, and so we've been kind of like putting a couple things on hold and trying to figure things out. And so that book is still being worked on though, and I do plan to get it done as soon as I can. So we'll see when, and I'm assuming it would have been nice to have it had this year. I was hoping to have it during Lightbox. I don't know if it's going to happen because it's coming up real soon. So I think what's going to have to happen is we're going to push it till next year early, just so we can get good quality out of it and have the time to be able to kind of put the work in. So for those of you that have been anxious to get the second volume, I do apologize for the delay in the release. Nothing is concrete just yet, but concrete in the sense that it is coming out shortly, sooner than later. Daniel's asking, how do you draw from memory without reference? I mean, again, that kind of general question is one that we get quite often in our streams and classes, and it's a welcome question. It's not something that's going to be something that we'll never discuss, at all. And it's one of an obvious question that we get quite often, especially at like live shows and I do my classes and whatnot. The question of how do I build that ability or skill, to be able to pull from my head, as either an imagined thing, a memorized thing, to be able to act on the visual images, as I have on the page. Of course, a lot of that stems from, for me personally, of my skill from the classes I teach now. I taught the class I have currently for the past, 13 years. I took it back when I was a student, of course, back when I was an art center, and with my instructor mentor. And a lot of you guys know that story. Um, and that was a class that really kind of like sparked that, I guess, the curiosity to be able to absorb that kind of information that I'm discussing. And we all obviously label, and you heard the titling of visual library quite often, I'm sure. And the visual library was something that we try to build as much as possible. And a lot of it was just daily mileage of exercise, of constant drawing. And that's, again, obvious that most artists will do this regardless. Whether you take a class or not, it's pretty simplistic to understand that we just have to practice constantly every day and we will get better. But is there, again, the question sometimes feels like there's an underlying question within that, which is, is there some form of trick? Is there some form of action or skill that you have that you learned or you did that can give me the insight towards being able to build that kind of skill myself? Obviously, I can just go to a class and practice it hundreds and thousands of times, and I can, spend my 10 to 20 years doing it, which is the obviousness of all this stuff. And that's something that, for those of you that are committed to do so, discipline, this is where your curiosity will build. And yes, your visual library will also strengthen. Um, so, just because that's obvious, though, it doesn't mean it's easy to do. Everyone understands the difficulty of everything I'm talking about and the question that is being asked right now. But again, is there some form of underlying thing behind just the truth aspect of just mileage and practice that you have to be able to do? That was there something that I experienced, something that I was able to hear or watch or see or do that you feel like you wouldn't be able to have a perception of being not in a classroom, not being in a school? Um, Not necessarily. I think a lot of the stuff is going to be coming from, like I said, just a lot of it within your own self discovery. It has to be that way because even though you can watch somebody doing certain things of actions, and you can ask the question of how do I build my visual vocabulary and memory building and draw from out of my head like you do. And it's not to say you won't be able to get there and you will be able to attain those skill sets within your own kind of like pathway. You're not going to be able to do it like I am, just like how I can't do it like others that are out there as well. The others that, like my friends at Superani and whatnot, all are able to do what I'm doing. And there's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of artists that can do what I'm doing, which is to draw from their imagination, draw from their mind, to varying degrees of level of quality, of course, in terms of confidence as well. But in general, that a skill set is not something that's unattainable, even by just people who just begin their skill sets. Um, but it's something that you have to kind of go through that self discovery on your own because there has to be this sense of ownership. The discovery makes you feel like you actually own the tool of being able to hone it, dial in on it, to be able to make it something that is something you can, reach out and pull out and use anytime you need to within a certain performance or clientele work or job sort of thing. And so that's a big component here because, again, it's like, well, here's what I did exactly. A, B, and C, and D. This is the school that I went to. These are the classes I took. This is how many hours I drew. This is how long I did it. This is the tools I go for. If I gave you all those parameters based on exactly what I had done, it's not going to equate to you being able to do what I'm doing. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't mean that you couldn't do it better. You potentially could. And that's reasons of why people are very interested and curious of what others are doing. Like, what are tools that you have? What kind of pens are you using? Is the question, right? What kind of school did you go to? How many hours do you draw a day? Those typical questions we hear all the time are because people are so trying to find out how to get from point A to point B. And so because there's no direct line for them to be able to see where that's going to go, based on what other people have done, you're trying to find out that path. And so I can just follow that and maybe I'll get there. And that's the thing about education is that I can't necessarily give you this because even if I did tell you all those things, it doesn't necessarily guarantee the same output, the same outcome, because we're just different people. We perceive the world differently. Our bodies are even different. The proportions of our hands and arms, those even change things. Our brain composition, the way we process information, the way we think from speed or slow or questions and things that we have or curiosity and interest that we build towards things, we have obviously different minds. So that's going to generate a different individual as an outcome towards this. So that question, as simple as it may seem, is not an easy one to be able to not answer, but to, I guess, have the sense of, I guess, not, there's no relief to it. It adds stress for some people because they're looking for some form of advice or answer. But it's supposed to give you the reality check of it, you know? And so again, it's one of those cases where you will have to discover it on your own. Through the actions of taking advice of others, going through classes, it gives you insight towards how others can do it. But from the daily mind of practice, that discovery will have to happen, and it will come through on the other side, where hopefully, given a certain amount of time, you'll have then this achieved sense of confidence with the things that we're talking about, to be able to draw from your mind, to be able to draw from your head. Now, the question is like, do all artists have to be able to do that? Is this something I need to be able to do with sure confidence to be able to make it into the industry? I mean, it'd be nice if you could, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that just because you can just draw to your head doesn't make you the best artist in the world. Is it a great tool to have? Sure, but is it something that has to be so well developed and mastered and perfected? Of course not. It's just a tool to help people to be able to visualize things. So for me, I like drawing out of my head and mind, and I have many different things in my mind of observations and studies that I've done in the past. I'm able to memorize to a certain degree, and there are tricks and advices of things I can give in a class. But within all that, like I said, it's going to take the person's, you know, interest, curiosity to be able to develop those skills of their own. Anyways, I don't want to just keep repeating the same thing over and over again, which I kind of am. So I do apologize about that. But if anybody has anything to add to that, please do. And, I'm sure people here can give advice on what they've done, what they're going for. I mean, even here in a recent comment, Polly is saying, you always need a good underlying drawing sketch before moving to pen and ink. Nothing wrong with that. Many professionals work that way. So I need to go back up a couple of questions I missed above. Um, Harsha is asking, what art is currently interesting you? What's catching your eye attention? Well, it's not art from a sense of like 2D. If we expand the world of art in different sort of mediums, that's a big area as to like where a lot of my interest also now goes. So for me, a lot of interest is areas of things like, um, sculpture, animation, and there are things that I don't necessarily do all the time myself, which is why I think I have a peak of an interest within those areas. Mainly because it's something that I enjoy observing and consuming as a consumer itself. Um, to watch, interact, and play, and all those sort of things. Even though I'm involved in the industry to some degree as a design element, but to be able to partake in other mediums like that as a viewer, I very much enjoy. But is there specifically an art piece or an artist or a medium thing that I'm really kind of like getting into at the moment? I mean, it feels like right now. Um, Shoot, what was it? Something that just caught my eye today. Trying to think. Not only today, but yesterday. Well, yesterday I was actually playing on the iPad Pro with Procreate, and I did an actual small little animation test. I was animating on Procreate, 2D animation, just sketching and drawing, and I hadn't animated something since 1999. I took a class on animation, 2D animation back then, just because I was curious about it. And it was one of the classes I was being offered, and so I did it, and learned a lot of the basic fundamentals of like animation and understanding doing the overlays and how many keys and how many frames does it go for editing all that stuff down. Even the basics of motion, things like bouncing balls and walk cycles and whatnot. So all that kind of sort of stuff I did practice when I was very young. I must have been like 19 at the time. And last night I knew of Procreate's animation functions and features. I never really used them before. And recently I've been watching a lot of animes again, a lot of old ones as well too. I'm rewatching the Slam Dunk series because it's been a while, and I just watched that feature, the first Slam Dunk movie, um, and the animation was just so beautiful. And I was like, I kind of want to just get more into like the action element of posing so much in my drawings, but I always wanted to see them move a little bit. So last night, literally for the first time ever, I sketched out this short little animated piece of a movement. I'm still finishing it, and I'll post it on my Instagram when I'm done. I won't tell you what it is just yet, but it was fun. I was doing that last night for a couple hours just because, So animation becomes a huge interest for sure. Marky is saying, having arm fatigue while drawing a long period and sometime in short period. Drawing is kind of like tilted about 15 degrees. Well, being that specific, it doesn't really mean anything. The fact is that if you're feeling pain and fatigue, I would say there's two differences between those two things. I mean, if there's pain, you have to fix something. If it's like sharp, dull, consistent, returning, then there's something going on, right? If it's fatigue, it's just because you haven't built up the endurance. So let's say your hand gets tired, builds up lactic acids, you get a little bit of inflammation. It's just that your hand isn't really built enough endurance to be able to hold the pen and move in that long period of time. That's just practice. Fatigue is normal. But if there's pain, again, for me, I separate pain and fatigue. Okay, so again, there's a good kind of pain like exercise, right? You go to the gym, you work out, you get sore, you get fatigued, but still you come back and you build up your strength and you're good to go. So same thing over here with drawing. I would treat it very much as a physical kind of exercise as well too, where you put in your time, you let your body get accustomed to it, but of course there's a limit in terms of how much you want to push it because you don't want to hurt yourself, right? Let's put a sword in this guy's hand over here. See, I'm going to go down a little bit to see if there's any questions. Some person is asking, that's literally their handle. Is there a question you wish I were asked? I have no idea. That's usually the same kind of thing that happens when I ask somebody to ask a question. If I ask somebody, hey, do you have a question? Most likely they don't have a question because they're trying to absorb information and listen on things. So they don't necessarily have thought of a question just yet. Same thing over here. I'm trying to, kind of express through mental thoughts of questions I'm receiving. But am I thinking of a question that we're asked right now? It's like not necessarily. No. Are there any in the past if I can think about it? And if I think about it now a little bit, mm, I'm seriously giving it a thought. Like, what kind of question would I ever want to be asked? Um, I don't know. I guess these kinds of streams, I like talking a lot about mindset, even the physical elements of things. The discussion, like even right now, when it comes to our talks about the act of drawing and sketching, maybe even like some of the philosophy behind it, you know, something maybe even deeper of a meaning of what we do within this creative field and why we do it and what drives us to those next plateaus and boundaries, um, and how does it then separate one person to another one in terms of their success and failures of things, uh, the kind of the bigger questions of how are some people able to get to these areas, how are some people not, what is in the actions that get them there, what are some of the factors in life that are part of it, um, is it all just based on the person's efforts, is it based on the person's mentality, is it their environment, is it the people, is it just luck and timing, or is it just variables of all those things, and what are they then, right? Again, those are things that I like to think about quite a bit. So I'm going to skip over a couple questions over here. I need to go down to the bottom. Let's see. Gilman is asking, how would you say a fountain pen like the ones you use compares to a G or a Maru nib? I never really used those kind of nibs before. I was thinking about getting a fountain pen due to its practicality in drawing without needing ink pot. So I don't really use dip pens a lot or dip inks, or I'm sorry, the dip nibs. I just use fountain pens mostly. So I've never don't really use the G or Maru nibs that you're talking about. I just use primarily fountain pens. The fountain pen I'm using right now, most of the time, is this one right here. This is an Estabrook company. They're based in the U.S. and Estabrook is a fountain pen that's kind of in the mid-range in terms of price point, but quality is nice. I like their stuff a lot. I usually stick with a F nib, not EF, F or maybe M sometimes. A B I would get for nib adjustments. I get a grinder and he'll work on the nib. Let's put the guy's cloth work over here. We're gonna put another person on this end, down this direction. I want to start to fill. Actually, you know what? Before I get into the characters, let's just kind of go in there and fill this guy up a little bit with darks. And I'm gonna zoom in slightly, get it closer in there. I can see a bit more in detail. And I'm just gonna fill this in, not as a complete just dark, but I'm gonna use a bit of the hatching methods to fill this in. I'm gonna go one direction at first. Sorry if the shadow's kind of blocking. And I'll go an alternate direction to give it just a little bit of noise. There's a string right there, so I'm going to leave that as a negative slightly. So again, going one direction at first. Back into the other direction, two-directional hatching, going into the crosshatch, which will give it just a little bit of noise. Back into that first direction. I'm not going to just fill it in, mainly because I like some of the movement of line in some of the shadow areas. Making it just flat black makes it too graphic for me sometimes. If I go that direction, I'd have to be consistent with it throughout the entire illustration. With this one, I want to make it a bit more line emphasized. So in the shadow grouping areas, I'm going to hatch. Not necessarily always with the form, more graphically in the groupings of these shadow shapes. Let's see, a couple questions now. Sorry, missed a bunch above. I'm going to scroll up a little bit. FTS Median Z is asking any advice or tips for urban sketching of buildings. Well, when you study a lot of their work of urban sketchers, one thing you have to realize very, very acutely is you can't treat the building as such a structurally tight subject matter. What I'm trying to say is the structure of mechanical things, buildings, things that we build by hand as human constructions, we see them as rigid elements or subjects or pieces. So vice versa, the contrast to organics or organisms, humans, animals. There's a sense of push and pull, and where line can be curved and straight, and we can do a lot of manipulation to those things, a silhouette, and get away with it within the posing and the actions and movements of stuff. But for us, when we look at things like a machine or a building, it's a structured thing that has to follow perspective. So it becomes very rigid and confined to the parameters of reality for us. And when it comes to urban sketching, we have to very much break some of those a little bit and go into the ideas that the lines don't have to be just crisp and straight, right? We're not cutting it into the paper. It's got to have a little bit of its own life. And when I think, for me, again, I can talk about the technical aspects of urban sketching, like how much you should learn perspective or understand how to do things like indication techniques or whatever tools you got to use. Those things are going to be helpful, of course, but those are things that can be learned just by natural time. Just the more you use those things and the more you do them by practice, you'll get better at it. But there's another part, which is the mentality of what you're trying to capture in an urban sketch. For me personally, when it comes to an urban sketching environment piece, it's not just about the elements within the subject matter as a theme or piece, but it's also about what I'm trying to convey through it. What's the scene supposed to even feel like? Does it feel open and airy and charming, or does it feel kind of confined and dense and brutalist, or does it feel industrial and heavy and whatnot? And based on how my lines and shape language or indication techniques are kind of conveyed, the images can also invoke that communication of that scene or location. So when you're urban sketching at a location, you're sitting there looking in front of a building or a house. What do you receive from it? Do you only see just a rigidness of form and line and perspective, which is all important fundamental techniques? But based on those tool sets, how do you then manipulate and use them to be able to say something through it, right? So it goes a bit deeper, when you go into that route, because you can say, well, I don't really care about what the building is telling me. I just want to draw the building. Well, then it's like, well, that's just straight technique. Just get good at your perspective. Get good with your pens and tool sets. Practice as much as you can. The obvious that most instructors and tell people will tell you. But I think, again, like I said, that will only produce the typical thing, what most people will do. But if you have a little bit more deeper thought as to what you're trying to say through it, even if it is just a building, and I think that's the thing you have to kind of understand, is that we see as buildings and vehicles and weapons as just rigid, hard stuff that has no life to it. But an architectural structure has so much to say as a cultural representation, a historical thing of where it came from. If those buildings could speak, right? Well, they always say that word of if the walls can say something or speak with the things they've seen. And you see old architecture from places like in Europe, or even in your local places where you might have cities and little towns that have been around since like the last 150 years, and the amount of many generations of people that may have gone through that. In that sense, where we take inanimate objects and we give it life. It's like, man, I wonder how many hands this pen has passed through, and what have they drawn with it? What have they written with? And what kind of personality would this thing take now? That kind of mentality I give life to in those things too. So, anyways, I don't know how much that will help you, but when it comes to that kind of observational drawing, I'm trying to think that way as much as I'm also trying to think about the obvious parameters of techniques. Art by Sex is saying, so in this commission, you can't redraw something on it, can I? If the client asks for, what would it be, or is defined terms made before? So the client gave me some ideas of what he's looking for. I sent him some concepts, and then he approved them. So knowing what I had done, I'm now taking that from memory and just reproducing it. So all of them were kind of like already established as elements of visuals, subject matter, angle, pose, action, all that stuff was already kind of kind of decided upon. I'm going to put a shadow shape here. We're using shadows to create contrast of top and bottom, creating framing devices so silhouetting of features of elements can stand out. So that the arrow can stand out as a silhouette, so you can see it. The arm gets projected forward. All the stuff behind gets pushed back. So we're using value, shadows, light and shadow to be able to convey a sense of depth and volume. So I'm going to skip through a couple questions here. I apologize. There's a very important question you have to ask. Just ask. I want to get to the most live section of the questions area. Here's from Potato Nut. How do you distinguish yourself from other artists other than style? Thinking, right? Because at the end of the day, all artists are using basically the same tools: pencil, pen, digital, paper, paints of different types. So we have all these tool sets that are readily available to us. And we learn then the typical standards of foundations. These standards of foundations of proportion, anatomy, line, drawing, observation, still life, perspective, whatever the case is. But from those tool sets, it comes back down to the individual and then how they are able to use them in ways that are either creative, unique, interesting hybrids, or based on just what you feel from them to be able to express. And where you then apply to a certain medium, or let's say industry, whether you're a fine artist or industrial individual, creative person, or a design-oriented individual, storyteller, whatever the case is, based on where you're projecting that kind of development of a product or a piece, hopefully you can find a way to create that sense of separation between you and other people. And what that is going to be based on how you process information and what you think about. And I think there has to be more than just about spending your day sitting at a desk and drawing countless hours, but it's also about, as we've talked about, the idea of offering something unique based on the idea of living. When you're out there and experiencing the world like we talked about in, let's say, the urban sketching, seeing architecture, buildings and cultures and worlds around you as you want to capture them, that sense of experience of living develops a unique individual of you. Not to say that not all artists can't see that kind of stuff, but your perception of it is singularly yours. But then how you're able to use this information to be able to apply it to, let's say, things you're producing, like I said, is what can then create this separation between you and many other people that are out there, or create this very distinguished individual. Not distinguished, but more of a individual that's going to be unique or stands out in a way. I don't necessarily think I don't think all artists would think this way, that they feel like they're so unique in themselves, right? I think most artists in general feel typically that they feel they have a lack of uniqueness. And that word of originality comes into mind as well too. People feel like they need to be more original, where they feel like everything's been done, and I don't want to be the standard cliche what an artist produces out there. And I want to have my own, as you said, style, or I want to have my own approach towards storytelling, or things I want to produce, or even the ideas that I have to be original. And that kind of thing doesn't really necessarily exist. I think I have to play within those standards of cliches of human storytelling, because we're all using the same kind of things. But I think it's then, of course, like I said, the experiences of the person living through life that can create then the uniquenesses of them, good and bad. good experiences and potentially bad experiences, the things that they've gone through in life, and those are things that we have to all pull from, and that will then give us the elements of pieces that we can use towards things like storytelling or character building or role building, based on our own experiences that we all can relate to, but they're still of our own, you know. Stephen was asking, what's the greatest misconception do you feel about working in the industry? I think there's the obvious part, which I think many instructors will get into, which is that the grass is never greener on the other side, right? Because you have this fantasy and there's almost this romanticization of the industry where right now I'm a student, I'm practicing all this stuff, and I can't wait to get to the industry and start working in these beautiful characters and illustrations and backgrounds or creatures or whatever the case is. And that one thing that is broken earlier on, I think, for education is the fact that you're not going to be doing those things. You're going to be designing some basic stuff like doors and windows or props and little, shirts and little costumes for the character or side characters. You don't get to work on the big things just yet. But that's pretty obvious. I think another part, when it comes to that aspect of the industry or the misconception of it, um, that it's not always just about the creative aspect. There's more than just the artistry that goes into this of a technique. Uh, I think you have to start to become aware and very good about your ability to negotiate, socialize, to speak up, or to be, obviously very confident in the things you're trying to put onto the page, and vocalize them as well too. So that vocalization, I think, is an aspect that I think most students would never consider really, because to them everything is about the techniques of art and drawing. So if I draw and paint really, really well, and I can design really well, I'm a sure foot in. It's like, well, maybe, I think based on that alone, you have a chance to be able to make into the industry and work. And that's fine because I've had many students in the past do that. But the ones that have longer legs, longevity in the industry, are the ones that not only can do things like drawing and painting and design using multiple mediums of digital tools or analog, but also they have the voice and the ability to speak on things. And there's specific layers to that because there's a speaking aspect of being able to just having conversation with coworkers and leads or clients to understand how to read the room, to understand how to read individuals, uh, knowing how to respond, and knowing how to organize your thoughts in ways that you obviously are aligned to the communication of the dialogue of our industry. So that's just normal kind of like office talk, professionalism, that kind of stuff. But I think there's the other part, which is speaking with confidence, having the sure-footedness of your own thing, things that you actually do, the things that you actually participate in, and as I said earlier, having a bit of a confidence to stand up for yourself, to speak on things based on what you feel is working or not working. Of course, when you're in the industry very early on, when you're younger, you don't feel like you have the the status to be able to have any sort of voice in the opinions of process or influence of story or design. And typically that would be true. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't test the waters a little bit early on as you start to build that sense of how do you actually move into that negotiation aspect of like, well, here's the design you want me to do. And they wanted something very specific, but I also wanted to try this out because I felt like based on the story and design, this would be a good idea to go for. And they could say, well, this is not what we want because what we wanted to have was this specifically, and you should just be doing that. But you should definitely test those waters and being able to push back a little bit. The idea of being able to just push back slightly is going to give them the early signs of, hey, this person actually has some ideas. The ideas don't matter right now. We want you to just do what you're going to do. But as you become more experienced and matured, if you don't actually speak up, they will never have that perception of you. So I think the ability to be able to kind of stand up for yourself and your work, I think is important to kind of learn as early as possible. In this day and age, currently too, as people are getting younger and younger, I think that's going to start to even become less and less, kind of a thing happening, because as you're not only inexperienced in your industry but also quite young, you can feel a bit bullied, in the industry a little bit. The people that are not only of higher status but also more of seniority, not of just of your status but of age, can sometimes feel that way, which is not a very good feeling. So you feel like I just kind of bite your tongue and wait. and there is things within our culture that are kind of like that, either in the industry or society wise. And so some of those things have to adapt and alter a little bit because the world is changing. The industry is getting younger, and those older people may still be there, but they have to be able to work with the people that are coming in as well too. So they just can't be just those rocks sitting there trying to do their own thing and do it the way they want it to. I mean, obviously, I'm not necessarily one of the senior level people, and I'm not an up and comer. I'm kind of like right in the middle. So I have enough industry experience, but I'm not some person that's been in a studio job for like 20, 30 years alone. So, but if I were to be that kind of individual, to be at a place of working industry for decades and decades, I would hope that I would have the mentality to be able to have also even the maturity to have the openness and conversation even with young people because they have ideas too, right? But anyways, that would be the ideal world. I don't know if that answers any question really. That in terms of the misconceptions of industry stuff, but hopefully that helps a little bit for people. Um, Paulus is asking what kind of brush pen is this one here. This is the thin line made by a company called Sumiro. I bought it in Japan, and it's a nice brush pen. It comes in a pack, a bunch of different colors. I have a couple other colors over here somewhere, but this is the black one. So I'm going to keep going down a little bit. Johnny's asking a question. You've been doing art for a long time and now switched to digital like a month ago, but I'm having problems inking in digital software like Photoshop. Any help would be great. Well, it's like I would say ink more analog if it produces good stuff. Not to say that you can't do things digital and get good results. I mean, you can produce just as equally a good thing as digital. But I would intermix the blend between the two as much as you can. But either way, if it's just about digital stuff, I mean, yeah, you have to find the right tool, the right brush that kind of replicates the feeling because that's what digital is doing essentially, right? Is replicating the analog thing. Um, so you have to kind of find the one that seems to match up to your aesthetics because as you've worked with paper and pen, as often hopefully as you had, you've kind of found a certain feeling based on the kind of texture or stroke of line or uh, pressure sensitivity or whatever that may be from those tool sets that now the digital tool has to kind of somewhat match up to. Um, so you have to search a little bit. For myself, when it comes to Photoshop brushes, I only really use the standard ones that come with Photoshop, honestly. I don't use a lot of custom brushes. I don't make my own brushes either, too. I just use the ones that are standard, like the dry media brushes are the ones I stick with my sketching and drawing. Um, there's I have hundreds of brushes, but I only really use like 4 or 5. So, and then most of them are just standard Photoshop brushes. Some people would even say moving over to like Clip Studio Paint might be better because Photoshop it may not be as maybe layered or in depth compared to Clip Studio Paint. But I haven't used Clip Studio Paint enough to say otherwise. So. Yeah, it's probably just said. I just saw the comment now. The quote of the day is a question. Can I give a quote of the day? Well, this is one I use in all my classes all the time. I have used it in live streams before as well too. But for those of you that are joining for the first time, this is a good one, especially as I come back now after it's been a couple of months since I've streamed here a bit. Uh, Usually, the one quote I like using, especially at the beginnings of the early trainings of sketching and drawing, uh, is to think before you draw. Don't draw while you're thinking. Overthinking usually leads to catastrophe, right? So uh, keep that in mind. All right, so I'm going to keep going into this guy's other portions of his costume over here. Actually, I'm going to put a little quiver on the back. And we'll see if there's other questions. We have them. A Beckles is asking, how's my time in San Diego Comic Con this year? So obviously in the live stream I posted about this being post Comic Con. So we certainly can talk about that a little bit. For those of you that did not go and haven't been to Comic Con San Diego, it's definitely one of the bigger shows in the U.S. as a comic book convention, where it's not really about comic books anymore these days. It's more of an entertainment industry convention. This year felt a little bit different, and I've been going to Comic Con since 2008 as an exhibitor, and I've been a couple times before that as an attendee. And most of the times, well, I mean, especially since like 2010, there was a massive just like growth of interest in this kind of industry, especially when a lot of the Marvel movies started coming out. Because I think Iron Man came out in 2008, and then a lot of the other Marvel films started to kind of roll out like once a year or so, and it just kind of exploded from like 2010 to about 2017, 18. So for that number of years, Comic Con just got exponentially larger because of Hall H and all the like celebrities and stuff like that. But for this year, well, before that, last year when I was there, it was a good show, but it felt a little bit light because it was still kind of like right after COVID was kind of dwindling down a little bit, and people were showing up, but everything was standardized as like mass stuff and everything. So people came, but it felt like people wanted to kind of stay away from the show still at that time. This year, it was definitely the attendance felt like normal to what Comic Con would usually get. So you're talking about quite a bit of people. But it still felt different this year, mainly because a lot of the studios and films didn't come back. So Marvel, MCU, DC, all that sort of stuff didn't have large panels. So that means no big celebrities were present. So because there were no big celebrities, there were no Hall H panels. A lot of the people stayed in the convention center. They just stayed in the convention center to go walk around, look at art, and talk to artists, and look at the booths and whatnot. So there's a lot of foot traffic for sure in certain locations. In certain other parts of the convention center, it's foot traffic is kind of whatever. But from where I was, it was a good amount of attendees and interactions and questions and people walking up and seeing things. And so I was there, obviously representing still kind of myself, but also Superani, because that booth was Kim Jong-il's booth. And I would have been there, typically with him and others at the time. But, because none of them showed up this year, Superani is taking a break from Comic Cons and expos and shows. I sat in their place, to be there, be present. So I was there mostly to do like the whole meet and greet and talk to people, and I was doing a lot of live drawing and whatnot. There's a piece right back over there. That's the Galactus piece, the one I had done at the show. By the way, when I finish those large pieces, people ask like, "What do you do with them? Do you sell them?" It's like, no, they just pile up in the back of my room. They don't go anywhere. But yeah, it was. It felt nice because there was a lot more just people walking around to see artists and look at the booths. But there was another thing that felt different too. Is that I think this was the only year I've had a large amount of conversations with people that it was their first time at Comic Con. I must have had maybe like 10 people tell me this. And it was bizarre because in most years, in the past, whatever number of years I've been there, I would really, I would really have like a handful, like one or two people that would actually tell me, "Oh, this is my first time at Comic Con," and they'd be like a girlfriend or a wife or a husband or a boyfriend or something someone that came that's not really a part of the industry, never really had an interest in it, but they were just kind of dragged along. But for this year, for some reason, there was definitely a lot more people that just came because they just could. So that was a good sign. It was a good sign because having new people as an audience is always a fantastic thing. Also, it kind of shows that maybe there's a better chance that people can just get into the show itself, which is also a good thing. But either way, I had a good time. Had a couple panels. I was in the Kim Jong Il panel memorial. We had a panel for him to kind of remember Kim Jong Il. They did one in New York Comic Con. They wanted to do one here in San Diego. It was kind of operated by the manager of Superani here in the U.S., Lim Her, and I was on the panel, as was Katya Tarada, a couple other artists like Tang Li and a couple other people as well. But anyways, it was a good one. It was a good thing. Good amount of people showed up. It wasn't like jam packed, but it shows like these ones here. There's just so much going on that you're bound to miss stuff. But if anybody's interested in going next time, I would recommend it. It's a great show still. Let's look into your other questions here. So Anton's asking, what do you think about future of AI in art and how it shall affect us? I mean, it's such a, obviously a hot topic, and you can talk about it for hours on end if that was the main area of discussion, which it really isn't for me here. I don't mind people asking me about it. I don't mind even kind of mentioning about it. Basically, I'll keep it short. Um, I can say that I have no concern of AI and how it will affect me. That's just based on what I do and where I'm at in my work. I can't necessarily say just because that's the case, it's not going to affect other people that are in the industry or younger or otherwise. Of course, it'll affect them. It already has. A lot of them are losing jobs because of it. A lot of them are getting, well, we're already seeing it within the professional kind of mediums of products, whether shows or animations or prints and books or whatever the case is. It's already out there. Uh, to tell people just to adapt to it, just embrace it, is not what I want to say either too, because just because it's out there doesn't mean you have to embrace it or use it. Now, if you did, should you be reprimanded and ostracized, pointed at by telling you you're wrong? I don't agree with that either, honestly. Um, but I think it should be done with education and responsibility. The problem with this whole approach is that it was just released without any form of restriction or parameters or understanding about what it even is as an actual tool, because people are confused. The general audience has no idea actually even what it is. They consider it an actual thing, much like how we artists will look at an inspiration of something. For example, I could say, well, here's a little sculpture of Porco Rosso. And I'm looking at this thing right now, and let's say I drew a character, or I even just drew this, right? Let's say I like even turn the angle, pose it differently of this character of Porco Rosso. They said, well, that's what AI is doing. It's taking images online and fabricating some new image based on that thing. It's like, well, that's the problem of the misperception of it. Is that that tool, the algorithm, is not necessarily doing inspiration. It's doing literal copy, or not copy, even take. It'll take an image of this. It'll cut that piece out and cut another piece out and put it together and formulate that image for you. Now it can do this 100 times over with multiple images, and so the point where you can't necessarily even sometimes pinpoint things, and sometimes you can. This is where the style set starts to come up, where you can style set, prompt based on, I want it to look like that artist, like Ghibli or Miyazaki. It'll look like Miyazaki stuff, right? Because it's literally taking images online from that, because you are sending out that animal to go out there and sniff out all those images, essentially. So as you prompt it, it seeks it for you, and you can't blame the program for it. I mean, you can blame the people that programmed it to do it, but that is what essentially is doing. So it's not what we do. Because if you're saying, well, what is the actual then direct linear approach to that as an artist such as myself? Let's say I have like trading cards here, basketball cards, and I cut out this player, okay, and I put him on there, and I cut out that basketball, and I put it there, and I cut out his shirt, and put it on top of that, and I mishmash and hybrid it together. And I call that my photography or my drawing or my painting. That's what I'm doing. That's an analogy to it, right? You're literally cutting out the images of the thing of a printed piece, or let's say even a copyrighted piece or another artist's piece, and you are just hybriding stuff together. It's not actual artificial intelligence. This is a program you're actually computing or asking it to do certain things where it's programmed to do it. It can't literally just sit there without any form of prompt and just make up its own image by itself. That doesn't mean it can't one day, that actual artificial intelligence couldn't exist. It could, and it's very much on the path of where it's going, but that's not what it is right now. So it is not what people think it is at first. That's the one thing we have to understand. So inspiration is very, very different, because as an inspiration is a spark to a creative idea. What do I use that information for now? To be able to actually, incorporate it into an image that does not pre-exist. It can resemble the things I'm looking at. It can very much be inspired by those things as a visual nature or functional nature, or whatever the case may be. But that's as far as it goes. And as I'm then mixing in the creative blends of stuff, it's my take on it. FT is then saying, we're told that universities use it as inspiration, so but we have to give reference to our prompts use, and we have to only use it as a situation, otherwise it's classified as plagiarism. So here's the thing about this too. You are using it in a university to find it as inspiration. Here's the thing about that. In education, okay, I don't think there should be any restriction of how you should first set up certain things to be able to learn from. One, to give you better context of stuff, but also to improve your skill. For example, master copy, right? I did a lot of master copy when I was in college. And master copies are literally you looking at an image of a person's painting or drawing, classical or modern, and you would literally do a one-to-one copy of that piece. Now, I would never put that stuff out there and sell it as a print saying, hey, that's my original painting. It's a Caravaggio, but that's my painting. I would never say this, right? So we do that as a student to practice. So there's nothing wrong with that. And I can put it in my portfolio and say, this is my student work. Everybody will understand you're a student, you're just learning. That stuff is not your own. That's fine. But that's the issue. It's all about how you are claiming that work, especially after you go out of school. So if you're no longer a student and now you are a professional artist and you're attending shows or conventions, you're making books and art and prints and that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden you're doing that action of either copying it and selling it out there is just as bad as doing it, an AI thing, because you are literally taking pieces of other people's work, collaging it together, and claiming it as your own. And that's the issue right now. But as a form of use of inspiration or educational tool set, I have no problem with it. I think there's also potential use for it within the world of actual professional world. So, if the studio, a game studio, animation studio, was producing its own content, artists were making their actual pieces of design, characters and props and worlds and background, and it's using that tool set to be able to say, hey, take our work that we generated within our studio and give us many different iterations of things that we need also as well, right? It's using the work from inside that studio. And you might think, well, those artists, that's their work though. Well, that's the thing about working in the industry, is that once you are then contracted to work for a studio, that work doesn't belong to you. Belongs to the studio. They can do with it as they please. So that's a whole other thing about that. But in the industry itself, they could have potential viable options like that to generate as many different iterations of design ideas or even assets they can use into an actual film. There is benefit. And the thing about this is that we're not saying that AI is bad. What we're trying to say is that how it's being promoted, used, or even abused, right? Taken advantage of other artists as well too, is what the issue is. So restrictions are kind of needed, and how again, there are better people and smarter people than me that are figuring that stuff out. But anyways, does it affect me? No. Why? For one thing, I don't use AI. It's because I'm so against it. It's like, not really. It's just because I don't see myself reusing it. I don't 3D sculpt things. I just don't use it. It's just not my thing. I don't find it entertaining. I think it's cool to look at, but me actually doing it, I don't find it enjoyable. AI art doesn't look enjoyable at all to me. I have no interest in it. So it's not my world. So then how is it not going to affect you though? Because most of the stuff I do is on paper. When you put it on social media, well, that's fine. Still, it's okay. If it takes it, it's like, well, what am I going to do? It's like, well, you should say something. It's like, well, what am I going to say? Anybody online right now can go onto my social media account, look at a piece that I've done, copy it, and say that's theirs. Not even AI art stuff. They can literally copy it. This piece right now, I can put it up on social media. Somebody can copy it saying, this is my piece of art, and sell it as a print. If I found them online saying, hey, cease and desist, I can do this. But they can also do that behind my back and never say anything and never post about it. They could do that, right? So you don't really have full control of it. People are going to do what they're going to do. It's just that now they've been given that tool set and given that opportunity to do so. Hopefully, it doesn't become so abusive to the point where it completely just demolishes people's ability to generate work to make a living off of it. For me though, it's like I'm going to be doing this regardless of if I'm making a living or not. And granted, of course, it'd be nice if I was making a living. That's what we're all here for a lot of times in the creative field. But still, I don't really have fear of it, because it still can't do what we as artists do. The artists that are using AI don't have the training of people like me. That's the way it is. And if you feel like that's kind of not really aligning with the way you're feeling about it, I understand and that's something where more research and through more kind of back and forth conversation will hopefully help you figure that kind of stuff out. But for myself, I really don't have a huge amount of concern about it coming through with it. It doesn't mean I'm not paying attention though. It doesn't mean I'm not talking to people. And I will say there's a lot of fear for sure, of course, and I get it. A couple questions above. Do I recommend Wat Atelier? Uh, do I know them? Well, I know of them. There's a couple of people well, there's many students who've gone there that I've talked to. I don't really know a lot of the instructors by hand. I know Ron Lemon, who used to work with them in the past, but I don't really know Watts Atelier that well. But I do know that they're very traditionally based of their education and what they do. So I can't say I'm gonna recommend them or not recommend them, mainly because I don't have enough experience behind it. I don't really have opinions about things unless I've have had some interactions per se with them. But because it's so traditionally based, it kind of depends on what you want to do. If you want to do more traditional, like fine art, figurative work, portraiture, that kind of stuff, then yeah, I think it's gonna be great. But if you want to work in like the entertainment industry, some of those foundations will definitely help. But and I know that they're going to try to push towards this entertainment design world. But again, it's like I can't speak to their quality when it comes to education in the world of entertainment design. But it is an option. I'm not going to say it's a bad option to at least research it and find out. Visit the school, find out yourself. Sunstone is asking, will I do the Magma Interactive Live again? I would like to, because again, like I said, I'm going to be coming back and doing a lot more of these streams again in the future. Um, so hopefully we'll do one session again where we can do that, because it's fun. The Magma Studio is fun to be able to draw with people as I answer questions and whatnot. Dome is asking, any advice for taking pieces past the sketch phase? You have a lot of difficulty with this. Well, first you have to ask yourself, what does that even mean? Well, maybe you can answer that for me. Like, what does that mean for you? Taking it past the sketch phase. I'm assuming you're trying to take it to this sense of final, or the quote unquote final polish stage, right? Where you're trying to finish it as a inking piece, right? So it's clean, or what are the intentions may be. But that's something that you have to really try to figure out as to what that actually is for you, as to what is that next phase after a sketch. The more clear that is as an answer, I think you'll have a much better time of going past that. Um, if I was to kind of like help refine that a little bit as an understanding, basically think of it like this. Um, if you just sketch, right, and you have this mentality of just producing work, and you have no other definition or intention behind that other than just to like sketch something, and you want to obviously push it to this next stage. Well, then your mind is always set to this mentality of what is next, right? How do I finish this? How do I get to the next polished stage? But based on intention, you can have a lot more control of the way you perceive the thing. Because if you said that this is a sketch stage and it should stay at a sketch stage because I am trying to learn something, or I'm trying to study a form or proportion or whatever the case is, well, then, obviously you would know to stay within that area of intention and stop. You don't need to take it to this idea of finished or polished or cleaned up. That doesn't mean you won't ever do that, of course, right? You'll do an illustration like I'm doing now, and maybe you're doing early sketches in the beginning. You'll do an underlay and you do an inking and lining, and there's a process of steps that gets you to those stages of early development to a final piece you have to produce. And so those things I learned from education to studying other artists, and of course just natural practice, and you come to your own conclusions of how to actually define those steps for yourself. But if you don't have a clear intention from the very beginning as to when you're not going to do something like that, every single time you produce something, even a sketch, you're always in the mindset of how do I finish this thing, when you could have been already done because you're just trying to do something very specific as an educational method. Um, so it's mental first, in my opinion. Decision you made, the choice as to like what you're trying to do. So give yourself a little bit of thought as to before you start something, as to what you're trying to go for. If it's something that has to be an illustration and finished, okay, well then first think about, well, what's the general dimension? What materials do I need? What are some of the artists I'm trying to parallel with, right? Hey, Nico, I don't know if you're still here, but glad you would step by. Question is, will I be making a visit to New Zealand again in the future? I would like to. It's one of my favorite places to go. I've been to Christchurch back in like 2011. I was back up in Auckland in like 2017, and I really would like to go back again soon. I usually would go because I would be in Australia and I'd be doing a workshop out there. So if I happen to link up with that school again, the one in Australia, they're called CDW. And I've done online stuff with them 2 years ago. And so I'm always in contact. But if I'm able to do something again in person, that would then allow me to hop over to New Zealand. Okay, let's put some additional shadow shape down here, here. Looks like we're going to do this entire thing with just one pen. I was going to potentially use multiple tool sets, but it doesn't look like I have to. I felt like a lot of these shadow areas, I'll have to use a thicker pen to fill it in. But I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to kind of, make it more hatchy, cross hatching. So Jess was asking, just want to ask, what is my tips on growing the account on social media? Uh, and Jess, if you're still there, I'll try to answer the best I can. But it kind of depends on what platform you're trying to use here. It could be, of course, Instagram. It could be YouTube itself. It could be a lot of other ones out there, even things like TikTok. Um, it is not the same as it was when I first started. It's obvious, right? So when I started social media, this is back in 2013 when I first started using Instagram. I didn't start using YouTube at all for a while, but Instagram was my main platform, and Facebook is what I use as well too. Um, so I've gotten this time. What I'm going to do right now is move this a little bit because I'm going to start on another figure. I'm going to put it right over here. This guy. So the algorithm back then, when I was using Instagram, is just not the same as it is now. I myself, my platform, I feel like, has stalled. It's it doesn't really grow anymore. I don't feel bad about it. It is what it is. It's a medium now where it's been oversaturated, and there's a lot of things about it that of course, people still like, and people have a lot of criticisms of. And I myself, I feel like it's still good. It can still grow for people. I myself, I like to use it more consistently, but I don't see it really growing as much anymore for me. Instagram, that is, primarily. So as long as I maintain it as to what I already have, then I'm happy. I don't need to have like millions of followers. I'm okay with what it is. But that's now me having started this for over 10 years. But if I was a student, trying to start my social media account, let's say I graduated, I'm trying to look for work, is social media really even necessary? Yeah, I think social media these days is a mandatory thing that all artists should be taking a benefit of. It's for myself, what I say as a label is a new business card. It's a way to build a network of people, connect to them, see where they're at, what their work is, where they are, that kind of stuff. So I think it's a necessary tool to be able to have, to be able to interconnect with our industry. So you should take advantage of it. And there's no better time than now to be a creative, to generate your own products, to make your own thing, and to connect with people out there, professionals that you would have never spoken to in the past. Like for me to be able to actually speak to artists that I grew up with online is just, it blows my mind sometimes. You know, um, it's extremely fortunate feeling to have these moments of conversation with heroes that I have within art and design. But anyways, uh, it's just different now. It doesn't grow the same way as it was back then. So it's frustrating, and there's no real trick to it back then. Back then it was just about consistency. That's what most, I think, people told you as social media like professionals say. You got to be consistent, post at these times, make sure the content has such and such hashtags and that kind of stuff. And today it's like, yeah, those things still matter, but honestly, the algorithm is now built to fight against you. you know um, it's just set up that way, and because it wants you to do certain actions, it wants you to do certain things, and I don't. It's like it wants me to post reels, and everybody knows this now. On Instagram, if you don't post reels, you don't really get seen. and it's trying to mimic the TikTok world, you know. And I don't really use TikTok, um, but that's the thing about it. It's like it wants me to do real stuff, and I don't do reels. So I just post images, and that's what I've been posting always. So it's gonna obviously punish me for not doing that, and I'm not gonna grow my platform larger because of it. But again, I'm okay with it. Um, yeah, since I wish you could have spoken to him before also as well, whether online or through, especially at shows, at conventions, because that's where he's his best. Um, but anyways, so then, what do you do in that situation? Well, for me, I think, it's no longer about trying to go to this one platform anymore. I found that having multimedia platforms is really critical. So you should be using combinations of everything. I mean, yeah, Instagram, because one place may not necessarily blossom and grow massively for you. So having multi platforms might need to be done. Using things like TikTok, using things like Instagram, using things like YouTube as well. Honestly, I would definitely start a YouTube channel as soon as possible. Even if you don't put a lot of content on there, just establish your account. Just have it, because you never know in the future. A couple years from now, you might need a YouTube channel to be able to post some videos up. So secure your name on it. And if you are able to produce videos, now, then do so. I found that YouTube to be a much more friendlier kind of environment for the algorithm, for some reason. And even though I haven't used it for a couple weeks, almost a month, if not more, I feel like it doesn't necessarily reprimand me. You know, if anything, if I come back to it and just produce more, it rewards me. It makes me want to post more stuff. So the interaction is really nice. I think the format is a lot better. Like Instagram Live, I can't stand. I think it's terrible. I don't like the format, the vertical format. The quality is not that great. Being able to share it as a video, afterwards is again kind of crap quality. I don't like it. TikTok I've used for 3 months, and I was on it for 3 months, and I played with it, and I kind of gave up on it. I can see why people are on it, because it does grow fast, but it only grows fast if you kind of play within its community. you know, what I mean by this is that you can spend a large amount of time to produce as good of a quality of content as you can, editing the video, putting music behind it, making it flashy, investing actual committed time to make it an actual, worthy content. And you post it up there, and you might get some views. Even TikTok will actually reward you for your first couple posts. It'll have it be spread around on the feed quite a bit, and then afterwards it kind of like depletes a little bit, and then you have to be then consistently posting all the time. Um, but of course, the longer you make the videos, you don't get that many views. But that's, like I said, I'm not going to say that's guaranteed. And of course, there are accounts out there that have amazing content that could be really long as well. But the ones that are usually quick, short, fast, and funny, it's the attention span being so short. It's as an artist myself, I don't find it as a viable platform to use. Because I remember I posted this one thing. It was literally less than a 10-second video, you know, and I posted it. It was about this moment I saw at like some convention. As I posted that video, it was a stupid little video, and that got like double the amount of likes and views compared to like a 15, 20, 30-second video of me drawing something. Um, Now, again, granted, it's only been a couple months of me using it, so I understand people are like, "Oh, well, that's not enough time. You gotta, do this and this and this." And I'm sure if I did, it would grow a lot more. But I just felt like the environment and the community there really wasn't really built for people like me, like artists working analog kind of stuff. And I'm sure there are people that can be successful at it, but I don't know. I think maybe this that old mentality now starting to come up in my age. But I do like YouTube. I prefer this long kind of format where I get to really sit down and just like interact and talk with people. Because that's what this is about, right? To be able to actually have a chance to speak with somebody that has some form of involvement. Oops, sorry, that did sound a little bit involvement in the industry, or some experience that maybe as an audience people can, they want to be able to interact with in some way. Um, it feels more genuine in a way, I guess, with YouTube. But TikTok is just fast food, which is probably why it's so popular. But hey, if you do get great success on it, fantastic. Keep using it. But yeah, again, my Instagram has sputtered. But it's also partly my fault. Like I only post maybe like once a week now, twice a week, if that. Sometimes I post a bit more, other times a bit less. So I'm not even that consistent on it anymore that myself. So I'm sure that's an aspect of what's going on. If you guys have recommendations of things you want to see, even from my account, let me know. FTF was saying about New Zealand again, visiting Queenstown, Manaka, and Marlborough. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd love to see most of. I want to drive through most of the country. I gotta do that one day. Oh, and asking, you're 15, been drawing since you were 8. And ever since I got serious about art, I've noticed a lack of feedback. Do you have any suggestions of how to self critique to improve faster? That's really difficult, Owen. It just is. To self critique yourself is hard mainly because all you will see are the things that you're incapable of doing because you compare. Hey, this is the artist I'm following. That's another person I'm seeing, and the work that I'm doing doesn't compare to what they do. You know, so you'll feel nothing but frustration, and you feel aggravated. You feel like you're less than. You feel like you're not good enough. So all it does is it develops this mentality of this very harshness of the way you view your work. So it's not really constructive criticism. It's very defeatist in many ways. And it's not your fault. This is the mentality I think as most humans would do. I myself have thought these things when I was young. As I would compare myself to friends who are other artists as well too, or in the past, or artists that I followed, and why I wish I couldn't be, or I wish I could have been as good as them. And it's not even to say that I don't have those thoughts even now. Those slight mentalities of like, oh man, I wish I was stronger in this area for that or this or this. Uh, it's not to say it's a very dominating mentality anymore. It's just still there. It just doesn't really bother me anymore. But when you're younger, it's very, very strong of a voice that speaks to you in the back of your mind. But is there some way you can do it constructively in a way that's very helpful and that kind of thing? Well, again, I think the only way to kind of break the mentality is to have another person there. You have to have another set of eyes. This is where, of course, having friends that also have interest in the world of art becomes incredibly helpful. Um, this is, something that is not easy to come by. I think for some people, they don't have that environment, around them. They don't have that opportunity to build friends or communities of individuals that are interested in stuff they are. So when you're kind of on your own doing it, it's also a very hard, kind of transition of trying to become a student to professional at that stage. It's very difficult to make it, honestly. But for that constructive or the criticism end of it really comes to that. You have to have more people around you. You can't rely upon your own criticisms as a reliable source. It's a good way to get started based on like, oh, I think I see, based on what I'm looking at as a study, I'm off on these things. You just see the discrepancies of inaccuracy, whether it's like proportion or form or perspective or whatever the case is. Um, so that's kind of the obvious stuff when it comes to self-criticism. You look at those foundational methods, but there's more there, to critique on more than just about your failings on the technical side of things. And this is where then again, like I said, more pairs of eyes can help you on that, but especially trained eyes. This is where then going to an educational route, taking classes and whatnot. And you're 15 right now, so give yourself about another 2 or 3 years. And once you finish up high school, start to look into some either local programs or online things as well too, just to get kind of into that world, and that could be a good start for you. Don't rush though. There's no rush. And I'm not just saying this because like, oh, you're young, you can wait and all that kind of thing. It's like, no, I think you just need to keep playing with the materials, with the subjects, things that you're interested in. Find out what you just really love doing in terms of what you like to draw, what kind of characters, what kind of like backgrounds or creatures or mediums and subjects, digital or analog. Play with all of it. This is what you should be doing currently. Playing, because playing is learning. Mitchell also asked, as a beginner who's trying to be a better at art, you started and stopped YouTube a few times. Any tips on gaining courage for beginner artists? And you're talking about using YouTube, Mitchell, like posting videos and whatnot, um, the only thing I can suggest in that is that you do it for you. You don't do it for others. You happen to just put out, you know, demos and examples. Hey, I'm drawing this today, or I'm drawing that today. And people follow you and watch you, and maybe even ask questions on the comment stage and stuff like that. If you're doing it live, you know, you can, just like I'm doing right now. I mean, you shouldn't disallow yourself to have these experiences and do these actions just because you feel like you're a beginner. You know, like anything, as a learning experience, it's only going to help you. So the more you get involved in it, the more the you get to the ins and outs of how it works, and you actually will improve as well too. But like I said, you're doing it because it's an action of things that you enjoy doing for yourself. If you're trying to do it for others to satisfy them, then you're going to treat this like an actual job, and it's not going to be fun. So you don't want to do that. And I'm sure that you're probably not doing that. But either way, I mean, getting started on this is only going to help you. It's not actually going to hurt you in any way. If you allow it to, then of course it could, because maybe you take things very personal. The comments that somebody says, or the things that somebody mentions. I mean, people can say anything they want, even like in here. But it can either stick to you, or it can be like, oh, whatever. I mean, people can say what they want. You don't know who they are. What does it matter? You know. So if you are experiencing that as well too, where people are either leaving behind comments of things that you don't agree with or don't like, or let's say there's no comments at all. There's no interaction. Nobody's even seeing it. Again, if it's not for anyone else, if it's only for you, none of that stuff should matter. Because are you going to be drawing on your own anyways? So if you can post it on YouTube, you might as well do that as well, you know? I mean, you can have, right now, in my own stream, you can have a bunch of troll people coming in here and, you know, degrading the work that I'm doing or commenting on stuff and things that they want to have or see. Like, well, I'm not here to cater to you. What does it matter what you want? I don't know who you are. You can't demand such things. This is my platform. I'll do what I want. I get to speak to who I want to speak to, uh, and that's all it takes. And in the real world, would somebody actually ever really do that? And if they really were, if they're sitting in front of you and you know speaking that kind of way to you, you that, that kind of conversation within we have a back and forth. Um, but online, it makes no difference because they're not in front of you. They're not real people in any ways. At least in person, you have a chance to be able to actually say something, right? But then some people online also do it because they just want to. They just like to create, you know, they like to instigate trouble, and they just want to laugh and because they're bored. How many comments I've seen in the past on things like social media where people just kind of like troll things because, hey, I'm just bored. I'm just making fun of things. They don't care. And you can't stop them. I'm not saying they should stop. It's their choice and how they want to use their time in their world and life. Uh, but that shouldn't make an impact towards you in any way. But I understand, you know, when we do something that we care about so much, you know, um, when we're doing something like this that we're putting so much of our energy and time into, of course, even the slightest of comments can not feel good. So, I'm not saying that it wouldn't hurt and that it would just automatically slide off. Of course not. It leaves things behind, whether people are aware of it or not, and whether doing it just for a joke or otherwise. Uh, we care. We care so much that it makes us sick sometimes. But that's where that dominating feeling has to come through, where you care so much that the passion behind what you do will completely beat out everything else that we're going into. The sense of slight anxiety or fear or pressure. As heavy as those things are, it won't beat the level of drive and passion you had before it. Have I met artists whose fame went up into their heads? I think most people that I've met who were, let's say, people that I looked up to, friends and stuff like that, have all had good dealings with me, good conversations. But have I heard through the grapevine of other artists that I know of that have done things where they become a little bit, where the mentality becomes loopy. They get this sense of celebritization, I guess, to a certain degree. Like I don't like that kind of stuff when people are celebritized. So when people come up to me saying, "Oh, you're this person, you're this famous, whatever the case," it's like, no, I don't like that. Uh, I had many young people that would come up to me like this, and of course you could say, "Well, that's you saying this." It's like, who? If you didn't have that, wouldn't you want it? Like, I can't say otherwise because it's just what living life I'm living right now. If I didn't, could I say that I wouldn't want it? I have no idea. I would say it, but we don't really know. But what I'm saying right now is that it doesn't necessarily make me feel awkward. I just don't think it's the best mentality that people should have. Um, so when somebody comes up to me saying like, "Oh, you're this such and such person, and I follow you for this and this and this," and like, well, just stop right there and like, who are you? Just tell me your name. Introduce yourself. Like I don't mind talking to people. You're welcome to come to me anytime you want to. Um, I like the idea that I'm approachable, that I can be, someone that is someone who's sought after because it's just a conversation that you want, especially in those moments where I'm there to present myself that way. I've had people come up to me on the streets, recognize who I was, like, "Oh, you're this and this," and I don't mind conversation with those people anytime. Um, but when somebody comes up to me is feeling like very nervous or they say all these things to like as if to put me up on something, I knock it down. It's like, no, 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 you gotta stop right there, start over. Who are you? Um, I've done that, not a lot, but enough times to know that I recognize the mentality. You met one in New York Comic Con. You won't mention names. Someone who was very prideful, or I guess had a bit of an ego, maybe. I mean, egos and stuff exist with our industry, and those people can be hard to work with because they can have a sense of um, what's the word? What's that word I'm looking for? They actually have this sense of responsibility or status as to where they are. Um, the sense of respect that has to come to them because they're in that position, that kind of thing. But a lot of times, in those cases where you have to work with those kind of people, sometimes you got to just kind of bite through it, and other times you can just kind of quit and move on. And I've worked with several people that weren't necessarily like the most egotistical; they were just hard to work with because communication level was tough. Um, but in the industry of the field I'm working in right now, especially at things like a Comic Con and whatnot, no, I don't think I've really met anybody that was, like I said, coming off that way. But I guess I wouldn't say the same thing if it wasn't just me. Like, what if it was me in my 20s? What if I was just a student? You know, is it just because of who I am now, or I don't know? Not to say that I am anybody, but entitlement. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. That sense of entitlement comes into play. Those kinds of people I've come across in the industry. I'm sure a lot of you have as well. They got that delusion. Will I be watching the Nate Diaz fight versus Jake Paul? No, I'll follow up with it afterwards to see what happens. I just saw that posting of Nate Diaz doing shadow boxing. He was smoking. I was like, what the heck are you doing? Um, I hope Nate Diaz wins. But these are circus acts, is what they are. If you watch it with the mentality as entertainment, then yeah, you're gonna have fun. But if you're going in there with this, mentality of like, as a serious fight enthusiast, you're gonna hate this. It doesn't mean I don't think that Jake Paul shouldn't be allowed to fight. It's just that this isn't something that I have interest in because I am a boxing fan and a fight fan, and Nate Diaz is a legend. Taylor, thanks. Yeah, I'll be there at Lightbox for sure, as will many other artists. I have another figure I want to put in this space right over here. We're at about how long now? Let me see. Let me see how long we've been going. We've been going about an hour and 40. Okay, We got about maybe like another 15-20 minutes left, so I can put another figure right here. I need to put one here, and I want to put another couple ones in the background. But that I might do later on. But here's the image so far. Now, let me zoom out a little bit. And we're just using the thin pen right now still at this point. I haven't changed it just yet. These are just like random barbarians, warriors. Just making them up. Using a lot of this shadow shape to kind of disguise some of the details. It helps in being able to create this generalized figure. So Mitchell was saying this one's for everyone. How do you all get over that thing where you are practicing like boxes, cubes, and mannequins, and then you just draw to draw? How do you know? How do you all know when to switch from one to the other? It's a good question. If anybody has any comments on that or things they can mention based on their experiences, please do share. Mitchell was asking then, did I go to college? I did. I went to the Art Center College here in Pasadena, California. Went there from 2001 to 2004. And I taught there for 10 years, from 2010 to 2 years ago. So the Art Center College was kind of known for their illustration department. They're primarily known for their transportation design. And going there is how I met my mentor. He was the one that taught me a lot of the sketching techniques that I teach now today. So I carry on his legacy, as we say, honoring his investment and his passion for teaching. He passed away in 2010, tragically, unfortunately. And if you read about that story, you can just go on Google and look up Norm Sherman, and you'll find a website for him that we set up that kind of tells you the story about who he is and what happened. But he was a teacher of mine from Art Center from years ago, and we were close friends. Got to know him and his family. Still see them every day. His son just texted me the other day. We were supposed to meet up next week because he's actually an artist now himself. I've known his son. He has two boys. One of them is now 25. The other one is like 22, 23. And I've known them since they were like 4 and 7. So watching them from young kids now become grown men, going through college and become, professionals themselves, and trying to be there to, give them a little bit of guidance on things because their dad gave so much to me. Sunstrom is asking, when I have too much ego, I watch Kim Jong-gi, and I remember I need to train a lot. Well, yeah, I think if you watch someone like him, it brings you back down to reality. I don't know, watching him, it wasn't really about bringing me back down to reality. It was more like seeing the possibility. To be able to achieve certain skill sets. Not to say I'm anywhere near that yet, but being around him and having a chance to actually draw and sketch with him have given me a lot of opportunities, to be able to pursue that mentality and thought of like, where I take my work, how can it not, when you're around someone like that? Mitchell, appreciate the words, by the way. Thank you. Mitchell's asking, you now do CGMA. I do CGMA, the school online. I've been with that school since the beginning when they opened back in 2010 as well too. I don't teach a class anymore through them. I run a mentorship sketching program with them. It's a small grouping, usually up to about 5 people or sometimes a little bit more. And I'm on break from it currently. I have a session going on right now, and I'm not coming back in the fall. I'm taking a break, and I'll most likely come back at some point later in the year or next year. But it's the only thing I'm actually participating in as an actual school. I taught at Art Center for 10 years. I taught at the Concept Design Academy in Pasadena for 10 years. CGMA been there for over 10 years. I taught at Brainstorm. I've done classes all over the world. CDW, um, schools in Denmark, in Paris, in Austria, gosh, I've done talks and workshops in places like Croatia, Poland, um, you know, Australia, all over. Not a lot of Asia for some reason, but a lot of Europe. Anyways, that kind of stuff, like I said, has been a big part of my involvement. But in the last 2 years, ever since the pandemic and closures and stuff, I left a lot of it and started my own school. So now I just run my own school online, and actually we start next week. So if anybody is interested in classes to be able to sit in or to be able to register to get some foundations, those classes are still available. Some of them are filled up now. But we start next week. So registration can be done on my website, Peterhanstyle Art. So a lot of these kind of live streams are great for me to also promote that as well because because I'm not a part of a school anymore and I'm trying to do everything independently. I got to use all my resources. And I think somebody had mentioned like social media is something that you would kind of feels like you're selling your soul to in a way. And I get that, it kind of takes away some of the humanist quality out of it because, people can just like promote brand and sell stuff on there and whatnot. And I'm not going to lie, I do that as well too. Classes that I run, I got to market it somehow. But that's the as an artist, not as a general average person, but as an artist, I think for all of you guys as well too, using social media becomes a mandatory thing because of that. It's just free marketing. So when you're trying to promote something to some degree, and all of us who are artists are trying to make something, right? Whether it's a piece of art to sell, original or print, a comic or a book, educational material or otherwise, everything we generate is there to produce as for an audience for them to be able to maybe acquire somehow, eventually at some point on a professional level. But again, that's not part of why I do this. So I hope you guys will have interest in the future. And of course, it's fine if you don't. Okay, I'm going to put one guy right there. I'm going to put a couple of additional small arrows and stuff around this side, and there'll be a couple background guys over here as well too. This is actually close to being not done, but fully established in terms of all the components that I need in the midground, the foreground. This is very much inspired by Frank Frazetta. So people are saying, "Oh, that looks like Frazetta stuff." I was like, "Well, that's a lot of the inspiration." So we talked about that stuff earlier today when it came to like the AI thing. The difference between that and what inspiration really is that I have images of what Frank Frazetta's work is like in my mind. I've also seen it recently and many times. I like his work a lot. Am I copying an actual composition of one of his stuff? No, not one to one, but they're inspired by a general type of composition type that he has, which is a triangle composition. That's what he's known for. So knowing that foundation of how he composes images, I can use that as inspiration to be able to move subject matter within the frame to compose in a manner in which is inspired by Frank Frazetta. So why Frank Frazetta? Well, it's not because I just liked him. It's because the client also wanted that. The client said, I want it to feel like Frank's or this piece in particular. It's like, great. Well, obviously I won't draw that actual piece, but I'll give you something that has a certain feeling or inspiration that comes from that. So if people are wondering, like, man, that looks like it reminds me of this and this and this. Well, it's supposed to. If anybody thought in their mind, like, this reminds me of Frank Frazetta, I did that intentionally. Let's see if there's any other questions. RJ is asking, how do you crosshatch? Did you learn how to do it over time from doing it, or did you learn from something? Well, a lot of it was also some of the classes from the Art Center days. When Norm was teaching dynamic sketching, we would do cross-hatching, hatching exercises. So as we have some of those exercises, where did they come from? Well, from the previous generations of artists that have played with hatching and line as well too. It's a generational passing of information, whether linearly or from inspiration. But we as artists are always analyzing and pulling from those things, and we can generate our own versions of it. But is it a formatted education? I mean, to a degree. The hatching was very much there in our class of dynamic sketching, But was it strict within a formulaic approach? Not necessarily. In my classes now, it's a little bit more formalized in terms of like step-by-step methods, and you do approach of hatching and how we hatch, what direction we go into, line weight, how many hatch lines you go for, length of line, all that stuff I talk about. But that's in my classes. And then, of course, what you're also saying is true. It is also a part of actually just doing it, and you get to feel which directions you want to move your lines, which way feels the most appropriate in that moment of a scene. And that decision making, which is a hard part within this, and anything when it comes to you creating an image or a drawing or a sketch, the decision making is what you struggle with most of the times. You're trying to figure out, well, what do I want there? How do I draw it? What's the pose? What's the line? You think so much about trying to figure out what to do. So when you can problem solve through practice, because you put yourself in those moments of stress and challenge enough times, your brain is able to adapt quicker, faster. So for me, I don't need a lot of time to process information and think about what I want here, what I want there, what's supposed to look like here. I can make quick decisions instantly. Yuki, thank you for your comment. Appreciate that. Well, again, I'm going to try to have a bit more of these in the upcoming future, sooner than later. And I'm talking about maybe even like this weekend. I might do one. I think starting next week, I'm going to do another one. At least once a week is what I'm planning to do. Which particular day will most likely be a Wednesday at this point, Wednesday or Thursday. Um, because all my classes are ramping up, but those are the times at which I'll have a moment to sit for at least an hour or two, to sketch, draw, answer questions, just talk to people. Again, this is why we're here. Loki's asking, how did I find the motivation to keep pursuing your art career during the underdog days? Well, I think a lot of it was from friendships. Because of the college that I went to, it's not because of that college, this is experience, but it's because of the fact that I was in a place that allowed me to interact with a lot of people that had the same kind of mentalities and hunger and drive, that even though I had moments of like struggle, for example, when I graduated art center in college, I got no work. Nobody hired me. You know, I was 24 at the time. I graduated in 2004, and I didn't find work until about half a year later. Half a year it took me to find a job from graduation. And I applied to multiple studios in LA, all around different part of the country, different industries. And at first, I wanted to be at a specific place. Didn't get it. So I was trying to figure out like where do I go? Like I went to this college and I put all my work into it and I had this portfolio, but nobody wanted to hire me. And it took a minute of time to be able to actually find a chance, an opportunity that someone gave me. And it wasn't exactly what I thought I was going to do. It was in games. I wanted to work in animation, but because of that chance, it got me on my roll to move into the industry and start acquiring more work. And things just eventually started to pan out and work. But in the beginning, half a year of looking for a job was tough, and told no many occasions. And I knew this too. I wasn't good enough in many of those kind of places, industry. I wasn't good enough. But what can you do? It's like you just have to keep hustling, keep punching out more work. I actually went back to classes. I went back to art center, even though I was graduated. I sat in on them. The instructors would allow me to sit in. Some of my friends were still at art center at the time. I graduated early, so but because I had a lot of friends, that were still there, and then of course after graduation, they were very supportive, and a lot of them were good contacts. And I was rooming with a high school friend of mine who went to art center with me, and we lived together. So, we had a lot of shared experiences and whatnot. And he got hired right away, actually. And he was very good. So I learned a lot through the friends that I made. And that got me going, because there was so much encouragement and support. As I said, that's not easy to come by. And in many cases, when you go to the educational process, that's the reason why you should go. That's priceless as an experience. the people that you get to meet. And you can have this kind of experience to a slight degree online. It's not as easy to maintain. The in-person thing is you can't just beat it. You can't beat it at all. You know. But whatever college you go to, it's more, of course, what you put into it. Just because I went to art center doesn't mean you have to go there. Honestly, I wouldn't even recommend it that much anymore. Art center. Do you need to be a certain age to join and buy your classes? Well, I would say it'd be good to have if you're under the age of 18, of course, getting parent approval is required. But at the same time, it doesn't mean I haven't had students very young, like 17, 16, as in the past, because there is no actual age restriction in it. If they were coming in and I noticed they were very young, let's say they were like 13, 14, like, I'll give you your money back and maybe you can wait a little bit. I'll talk to you, try to figure out what you're doing next and maybe recommend when you should come in. But if you're like, at that point about midway through high school, getting to the senior level of high school, I think it's an okay time. Because a lot of my students at Art Center um, were reaching about 18, a lot of them, because some of them were coming right out of high school into Art Center when I was teaching there, which is a very different kind of experience than when I left. Because when I left high school, I went to a 2-year college first, and then I went to Art Center afterwards. So I was like 22 when I started, 21, which doesn't seem that much older than 17 or 18, but it's a world of difference. From an 18-year-old to a 21-year-old, it's only a couple of years, but it makes a change. So that little extra couple years of just education that I had after high school was huge beneficial. So even now, I mean, the young people today out of high school are very capable. You guys are just incredibly well adapted, in terms of anything you want to put yourself mind to. Um, and I respect the level of intelligence and curiosity that comes from that. But still, there's that level of social maturity that comes into play. It's a bit different, and that kind of growth, I think, is also incredibly important to build. But as an online course, you can also just be in there to kind of experience it, to watch and participate, listen, do the homework. Um, the more you put your time into it, it can be a much more rewarding thing. But either way, besides that, that's the only thing I can say about that. Flavia is asking, in my opinion, do you believe that being good at art is good enough, or is there a bit of luck to get jobs? Being just good at art is not enough, and having luck is just a portion, a slight percentage of an element of this. So, what are some of the other elements within that? As having being good in your foundation techniques, and we talked about this earlier today. One of the main components I just mentioned was about the verbalization, the social aspect about you being able to speak about you, your work, and having conversations with others and individuals in the job. That's a big part of it. Another part is that corporate lesson that you have to learn sometimes. The ideas of deadlines, your professionalism, things like presentation, things like how you treat your time management. That kind of stuff is also quite important as well too. Because you can have all the amazing work, but if you don't get the work done, then you're not hireable. So yeah, having just good techniques and skills of art is not enough. What are my recent thoughts about the recent UFO hearings news lately? I have no idea. Do I ever think about aliens? No, not really. Do I think they exist? Sure, there's a high chance of potential chance that could be the case. Uh, I don't know if I ever really come across them as interactions or findings within our lifetime, but to say that within our solar system or beyond universe that we can't have the potential of finding some form of life, I think we could. But are there aliens visiting Earth right now? I have no idea. Would it be cool if they were? Sure, why not? I want to see what they look like. Imagine if they could draw better than us. I don't think they would even have to draw. They could probably just concoct it out of their mind somehow. For them, the 2D world is probably a dimension they see as archaic. Maybe they live on different dimensions of planes. Even the way we perceive 3 dimensions is not really truly 3 dimensions. Yeah. What would alien art look like? I don't know. I think it would be more sensory, more experience, less static. Maybe. So because it's a sensory thing, it could be potentially shape and formless. That it's not even a visual. It's an experience through art. It's something that isn't even actual tangible thing. Who knows? But isn't that what music is? I mean, to a degree. Sound is a sensory element that's not visual. But it's still, I guess, electrical signals to our brain and everything else, right? But what's beyond just electrical signals, right? Who knows about that, anyways? Maybe they'll see 2D work as being this relic, kind of like how when we see things of you know ancient art from people in the past, and you see like the wall carvings and art and stuff like that. And I've seen a lot of those kind of dwellings um, from ancient people. You see handprints and stuff like that. It's amazing. And it's fascinating because it's one thing to recognizable images, but you're able to perceive that there was someone there that actually made that, and it's a very almost emotional degree of connection between that. And even though it's visually not as complex as this, there's still something very human about it, of course, because it is human. The Pueblo people. I'll see a lot of the dwellings out in Utah. We go to this place called Bluffs. The canyons out there. Oop. Sorry about that. See if there's any other questions. Well, we only have the last couple of minutes left. If there are any other questions, please do ask. We are kind of winding down to our last moments because I'm starting to kind of just a little nitpick here and there. I still have a couple of things I have to do in this piece, but at this moment in time, a lot of the major elements are now in place. Put some arrows into the ground as he's shot all around. But I hope you guys have enjoyed our moment together, just to like speak, talk, draw, that kind of stuff. I'll try to do more again, like I said, starting next week. And if you do see the notification on my YouTube or Instagram, that's probably the best way to kind of find out when I'll be coming up again. Usually, if you just go on my Instagram and see the stories, I usually post when I'll be going up. A lot of times I'll try to pre-plan it a little bit more further in advance. But right now, at this current time being, it's kind of more of a pop-up situation. So just follow me on social media, and you should be able to kind of get a notification on stories of when I'll be going up. But like I said, look towards maybe around like a Wednesday or Thursday next week if you're interested in joining again. For those that watch the recording, that's the times maybe to go in. But in any case, I will see you all next time. I hope you guys enjoyed the process so far. And I'm going to post this obviously on my social media account, the full image, but at least you got to see the visual development of the initial strokes and lines as it went from the figure all the way down. I have more stuff to kind of put in, which I'll do so later today, and I'll wrap things up. But I'm going to leave this as a black and white, and I'm going to scan this first, and I'm going to do a color version after that. And so that will go up on Instagram later on, either today or tomorrow or so. I got to send this out to my client this week. But in any case, thank you again, you guys, for the questions. I hope you guys had a good time. I will see you all next week. Appreciate it, you guys.